Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Welcome to our home church. Let us prepare our heart toward heaven. Let's sing a song, page 51, the Belvedere song. 51, Belvedere song.
I know a place where the sun shines like gold, where the cherries bloom forth in the snow. And down underneath is the loveliest place, where the four-leaf clovers grow. One leaf is for faith, and one is for hope, and one is for love, you know. And God put another one in for you. Every church you will find where they go. But you must have faith, and you must have hope. You must love and be strong and so. If you work, if you wait, you will find a place where the four-leaf clovers grow. I know a place where the sun shines like gold, where the cherries bloom forth in the snow. And down underneath is the loveliest place, where the four-leaf clovers grow. Where the four-leaf clovers grow. Where the four-leaf clovers grow.
Thank you. Next song is number 135, Near My God to Thee. 135, Near My God to Thee.
Nearer, my God, to thee, nearer to thee. Though it be a cross that weighs with me, still all my song shall be nearer, my God, to thee, nearer, my God, to thee, nearer to thee. Though like a wanderer, the sun gone down, darkness be o'er me, my rest a storm. Yet in my dreams I be nearer, my God, to thee, nearer, my God, to me, nearer to thee. There led the way appear, steps unto heaven. All that thou sendest me in mercy given. Angels to beckon me, nearer, my God, to thee, nearer, my God, to thee, nearer to thee. Then with my waking thoughts, I with
next song is page 34, By the Spring of Life. 34, By the Spring of Life.
We're marching to the blessed land of Canaan with delight. We're leaving all our heavy burdens here. At last we are released and we are being slaves to sin. We're coming to the blessed spring of life. Coming to the spring where living water flows. In glory we'll be living evermore. Going to the land where freely flows the spring. In glory we'll be living evermore. Oh, guide us to your pillars, Lord of fire and of cloud. Oh, give us paths to follow with our lives. The moment that we cross the Jordan River is at hand. We're coming to the blessed spring of life. Coming to the spring where living water flows. In glory we'll be living evermore. Going to the land where freely flows the spring. In glory we'll be living evermore. Our thirsty hearts receive with joy the manna from above. Your precious food will always be our strength. So lift the future and just like we will not despair. We're coming to the blessed spring of life. Coming to the spring where living water flows. In glory we'll be living evermore. Going to the land where freely flows the spring. In glory we'll be living evermore. In glory we'll be living evermore. In glory we'll be living evermore.
Thank you. Everybody stand up, greet Heavenly Father, God and children. Today is July 1st, 2018, the Sunday morning. Let us bow to Heavenly Father, God and true parents. Yongbe, hello. Please join me in prayer. 살아계 하시는 하나님 아버지 참 부모님 안녕하십니까? Most precious our God and true parents, we are so grateful to start a new week and new day and also new month. Almost in the America, celebrating the birthday of our country. Here in the Golan, we have 5 days of big celebration in the celebrating our country born, the freedom rings. We saw about the whole new history in the America, centering the God's country, try to keep our forefathers' vision and desire. Constitution made by our forefather was very unique. In the history, we never had the centering God, the idea of the world. Your kingdom is never made. But we can see that through our constitution, try to keep the God center. But now, we can see that our country is dividing left and right, and people is divided the believing God or not believing God, and so many division in the even church because we don't know the truly your kingdom. Through our Messiah, Reverend Moon brought a beautiful unification thought. The man and the woman standing centering God and create beautiful children that we call the four-position foundation. That four-position foundation was the fundamental the peace and happiness. We can create beautiful family and centering beautiful family and the community and nation and the world and the cosmos was created. That is your original ideal world. So everybody benefit in the love and the beauty and the respect and love. But we can see that the long history we have a war and a disaster and unlikely misfortune, people murder and die or disease and so many things. Unfortunate event was happening. Now your time, but even midst the difficult time, we have a choice to choose good or bad, or responsible or not responsible. We really want to take responsibility, not to blame anybody because of the disaster or war and many unfortunate events happen. But we know that we must take responsibility to do good and keeping the hope in our heart. Always goodness are alive, even midst of unfortunate event. Please guide us today. We can determine again to relive your truth and love and this love and respect each relationship. Through that, creating the beautiful world again. Please guide today. Each of us can determine to be the good filial son and daughter of you and filial husband and wife and filial grandparent to be and filial son daughter to be. Please guide our pastor can guide us today. You giving us the word through that we can courage ourselves and engage your problems. Please bless this time. Thank you very much. We want to offer this sincere heart. I report in the name of Raman and Tamiko Montanaro, blessed central family. Amen. Thank you. Please seated. Welcome Pastor Montanaro.
Hi everybody. So good morning. It's July 1st. Woo! And it's starting to get hot. We have a heat wave hitting the East Coast, and we're going to be in the 90s for the next 5 days. So it's really nice and warm. Today I want to read from Father's autobiography. So if you can grab some autobiographies and pass them around to everybody, that'd be great. We're going to start on page 57.
Page 57?
57, yeah. We're going to start on the second page of a chapter. So the chapter's title is "A Knife Not Sharpened Grows Dull." but we're going to skip the first page and go to the last paragraph beginning on page 57. What we're looking at here is Father has just received his mission from Jesus, and he has been plunged into a deep, intense kind of struggle to be able to accept the responsibility that Jesus gave him to find the truth that could save the world. He travels, in the previous chapter he talks about traveling the entire nation of Korea, hitchhiking, basically on trains and walking and seeing the entire nation of Korea. And it's a huge country, actually, I mean, to walk through. And he had spent the day, this is only 15 years old, and he'd already become that serious, and he changed and he became more serious. In this chapter and the next chapter, he talks about his life in Seoul. After finishing grammar school, he moves to Seoul, and he's basically spending the time in school at the Gyeongsang School of Commerce and Technology. So sort of like a business and technology school, science and technology, kind of like a STEM school. And he later on does go on to study engineering in Waseda University in Japan. So he's a very serious student, and he talks about how serious he was as a student. He also, in this chapter, is talking about how frugal he is, how he doesn't spend any money on himself. He leaves his room cold. He doesn't want to heat it because that would cost more money than he wants to spend. And when he gets any money, he gives it away to people. And he talks about how grateful he is when someone even shows any kindness to him. He can burst into tears if someone just shows him a little kindness, because he's not thinking about himself at all. So if anyone recognizes that, and they want to be kind to him, he's very moved by that. I want to read this so you, especially young people, can get a sense of, here's Father at 15, 16, 17 years old, living a life of high dimension. Father talked about when he was young, he said, I want to live a life of high dimension. In other words, not a trivial life, not a self-centered life, not a mundane life, but a serious life, a life that has an impact on the world. So let's go to paragraph, during my time. That's what we're going to read from. During my time in Hoksok-dong, I adapted for myself the motto, before seeking to dominate the universe, first perfect your ability to dominate yourself. This means that to have the strength to save the nation and the world, I first have to train my own body. I trained myself through prayer and meditation and through sports and exercise programs. As a result, I would not be swayed by hunger or any other emotion or desire of the physical body. Even when I ate a meal, I would say, Rice, I want you to become the fertilizer for the work that I am preparing to do. I learned boxing, soccer, and self-defense techniques. Because of this, although I have gained some weight since I was young, I still have the flexibility of a young person. Now, his youngest son, Hyungjin, is taking over the church, and his youngest son is doing the same thing. He did 10 years of intense Buddhist practice and before he became a pastor. And he's also got a master's in divinity from Harvard Divinity School, so he's also, a biblical scholar. And his sermons are incredibly biblically based. But his base also was 10 years of martial arts training. Buddhist monks were the ones who invented Kung Fu, and the other martial arts were actually invented by Buddhist monks. So they were great warriors, the Buddhist monks. So Hyungjin has been trained in both Buddhism and in Christianity. And he's a martial artist. He does MMA, and he's very serious about martial arts. Now he's getting older. I think he has to stop doing the martial arts so much because he'll get hurt. But I think he's still very serious about training himself. And you can see, he gets right from his father. It's not like he's inventing this. This is straight from father's own training. Gyeongsang School of Commerce and Technology had a policy that the students would take turns cleaning their own classrooms. In my class, I decided to clean the classroom every day by myself. I did not do this as some kind of punishment. It was an expression of my desire that welled up naturally from within, to love the school more than anyone else. In the beginning, others would try to help, but they could see I didn't appreciate this and preferred to do it alone. Eventually, my classmates decided, go ahead, do it by yourself. And so the cleaning became my job. I was an unusually quiet student. Unlike my classmates, I didn't engage in idle chatter, and I would often go an entire day without speaking a word. This may have been the reason that although I never engaged in physical violence, my classmates treated me with respect and were careful how they acted in my presence. If I went to the toilet and there was a line of students waiting their turn, they would immediately let me go first. If someone had a problem, I was frequently the one they sought out for advice. I was very persistent in asking questions during class, and there were more than a few teachers who were stumped by my questions. For example, when we were learning a new formula in mathematics or physics class, I would ask, who made this formula? Please explain it to us step by step so that I can understand it exactly. And refuse to back down until I got clear answers. I was relentless with my teachers, digging deeper and deeper. I couldn't accept any principle in the world until I had taken it apart and figured it out for myself. I found myself wishing I had been the first person to discover such. I found myself wishing I had been the person to first discover such a beautiful formula. The stubborn character that had made me cry all night as a little boy was making its appearance in my studies as well. Just as when I prayed, I poured myself completely into my studies and invested my full sincerity and dedication. Any task we do requires sincerity and dedication, and not just for a day or two. It needs to be a continuous process. A knife used once and never sharpened turns dull. The same is true with sincerity and dedication. We need to continue our efforts on a daily basis with the thought that we are sharpening our blade daily. Whatever the task, if we continue the effort in this way, we eventually reach a mystical state. If you pick up a paintbrush and focus your sincerity and dedication on your hand and say to yourself, a great artist will come and help me, and concentrate your mind, you can create a wonderful painting that will inspire the world. I dedicated myself to learning how to speak faster and more accurately than anyone else. I would go into a small room where no one could hear me and practice tongue twisters out loud. I practiced pouring out what I wanted to say very quickly. Eventually, I was able to say 10 words in the time that it took others to say just one. Even now, though I'm old, I can speak very quickly. Some say that I speak so quickly that they have difficulty understanding me. But my heart is in such a hurry that I cannot bear to speak slowly. My mind is full of things I want to say. How can I slow down? In that sense, I'm very much like my grandfather, who enjoyed talking with people. Grandfather could go 3 or 4 hours talking to people in our home's guest room, explaining to them his views on the events of the day. I am the same way. When I'm with people and there is good communication of heart, I completely lose track of time, and I don't know if night is falling or if the sun is rising. The words in my heart form an unstoppable flow. When I'm like this, I don't want to eat. I just want to talk. It's difficult for the people who are listening, and beads of sweat begin to appear on their foreheads. Sweat is running down my face too, as I continue talking, and they dare not ask to excuse themselves and leave. We often end up staying up all night together. So we'll continue reading the next chapter in a second, a little bit, just a few paragraphs, but I want to say a couple things about Father speaking. He set records for the amount of speaking that he did in his lifetime. No one has spoken more than Father did in his lifetime. So I was there several times when he spoke for 10 hours or 12 hours. I think his own personal record in a day was 16 hours in a day, just starting like at 5 o'clock in the morning and going right through the night. And he doesn't give breaks, so you're sometimes squirming to go to the bathroom. And he doesn't like treat it casually, but he's so involved, and so it's very interesting and very funny, and he's very entertaining. Also, one time I remember, it was the day after the Sunday after the daylight savings time went on in the spring. You know how the clock springs forward and falls back in the autumn and the fall? Well, on that Saturday night, Father always spoke on Sunday morning at 6 a.m. So we would go there at 3:30, I think, we would wake up. So we would get there by 4:30 or so, and then we would race to see if we could get as close to the front as we could, so we'd be close to Father. That particular day, my wife and I had spent almost the whole night talking. And suddenly we realized that we thought it was 2 o'clock and we'd be able to get an hour and a half of sleep. But the clocks had changed because it was daylight savings time. So we could only get a half an hour of sleep, and I don't think we even slept that night. And we took the van to Belvedere, and we sang the Belvedere song today, the first song we sang. And we caught the van, and we got there, and we were exhausted. And it was hard to stay awake, you know. But Father came out, and maybe because everyone else had also lost an hour of sleep. But for whatever reason, everyone was tired. And I could feel people were nodding off and falling asleep. And Father was trying to wake us up. He spent an hour and a half, I remember, until the sun rose. The sun peeked over the hills that to the east of Belvedere, because the garage where we were, you know, with Father was down at the bottom of the hill. So the sun had to rise over that. I think it was like at 7 or so, right? 7:30 when the sun finally came up and poured into the room. And that helped wake everyone up. But Father spent an hour and a half joking around. I remember him pretending to be a monkey and, you know, jumping around on stage, just being foolish like a clown. And I realized he was just trying to wake us up, trying to entertain us, trying to get our interest. And I realized he wasn't going to stop until he had us, our heart, until he could reach us. And I remember thinking, Father, nobody here is prepared to receive you. Just give up on us, you know, like, I mean, we don't deserve it. We don't deserve this effort. And he didn't care. And I realized he wouldn't stop until somebody was moved to tears, until somebody really started crying. And I remember looking out at everyone, and some of them were sleeping, and finally, it was like, I was so moved by seeing what Father was doing that I started crying. And I think Father looked at me, and he knew that he had reached somebody, that he had broken through. And very quickly after that, everyone started waking up. And I don't know who it was that moved his heart or connected him. I know that I was very moved by what I was seeing. But I know that Father only spoke for like half an hour after that. After he'd gotten everyone's heart, and then we were awakened, we were with him, then he stopped and he left. That was it. But he wouldn't leave us. He wouldn't quit because we had quit. And he was carrying us for that whole time. And I realized this is how Father lived his whole life. His speaking was a wave, a pouring, like an outpouring from his heart. And the words would go in, and they would hit you, and you would feel like you had to meet his level, his standard of heart. And none of us were prepared. None of us could meet his standard of heart, ever. But he wouldn't quit. He would keep on giving and giving until he would break through. And many times I had that experience with Father, where my tears, because I'm easily moved, but I would cry, and I felt like Father was grateful, and he recognized that he knows when people are moved. So let's continue now just a little bit more. A key to unlock a great secret. Just as I had climbed all the mountain peaks around my hometown, I explored every corner of Seoul. In those days, there was a streetcar line that ran from one end of the city to another. The price of a ticket was just 5 jung. 1 jung is the equivalent of a penny. But I didn't want to spend that money, and would walk all the way into the center of the city. On hot summer days, I would be dripping with sweat as I walked. And on frigid winter days, I would walk almost at a run, as if piercing my way through the bitter Arctic wind. I walked so quickly that I could go from Hook-Sok-dong across the Han River to the Hwashin department store on Chongno in just 45 minutes. Most people would take an hour and a half, so you can imagine how quickly I was walking. I saved the price of a streetcar ticket and gave the money to people who needed it more than I did. It was such a small amount, it was embarrassing to give it, but I gave it with a heart that desired to give a fortune. This chapter, we're going to see how generous Father was and is. It's just beyond thinking. He gives his own money, so he doesn't even have any money to pay for school. He gives his money so he can't even eat, to beggars and people that need the money. I gave it with a prayer, but I gave it with a heart that desired to give a fortune. I gave it with a prayer that this money would be a seed for the person to receive many blessings. Every April, my family would send me money for tuition. But I couldn't stand by and watch people around me who were in financial difficulty. So the money wouldn't even last to May. Once, when I was on my way to school, I came across a person who was so sick he seemed about to die. I felt so bad for him, I couldn't pass him by. I carried him on my back to a hospital about 1.25 kilometers away. I had the money I intended to use to pay my tuition, so I paid the bill. However, once I paid the hospital, I had nothing left. In the following days, the school repeatedly demanded I pay my tuition. My friends felt sorry for me and took up a collection for me. I can never forget the friends who helped me through that situation. The giving and receiving of help is a relationship that is matched in heaven. You may not realize it at the time, but thinking back later, you may understand. Oh, so that's why God set me there at that time. So if a person who needs your help suddenly appears before you, you should realize that heaven sent you to that person to help him. And then do your best. If heaven wants you to give the person 10 units of help, it won't do if you only give him 5. If heaven says to give him 10, you should give him 100. When helping someone, you should be ready, if necessary, to empty your wallet. In Seoul, I came across paramdo. Param means wind in Korean. Tok is the rice cakes, sort of like, I guess, you've had the Japanese mochi. That's the same thing. Tok is made with rice flour, very fine rice flour that's pounded into like a dough, and then it's made, it's delicious, you know, very soft and chewy. Paramdok is air dok, it's fluffy. So in Seoul I came across paramdok, a fluffy air-filled rice cake, for the first time in my life. These colorful rice cakes made in a beautiful, these are colorful rice cakes made in a beautiful design. When I first saw one, I was amazed at how wonderful they looked. When I bit into one, however, I discovered they had no filling, only air. They just collapsed in my mouth. This made me realize something about Seoul at that time. Seoul was just like an air-filled rice cake. I understood why people in Seoul were often thought of as misers by other Koreans. On the surface, Seoul seemed like a world filled with rich and important people. In reality, though, it was full of poor people. Many beggars, clothed only in rags, lived under the Han River Bridge. I visited them, cut their hair for them, and shared my heart with them. Poor people have many tears. They have a lot of sorrow pent up in their hearts. I would just say a few words to someone, and he would break down in tears. Sometimes, one of them would hand me rice he had been given as he begged. He would hand it to me with hands caked in dirt. I never refused the food. I received it with a joyful heart. I attended church every Sunday in my hometown, and I continued this practice in Seoul. Mainly, I attended the Myeongsudae Jesus Church, located in Hoksok-dong, and the Seoul-Bingo Pentecostal Church that held services on the opposite shore of the Han River. On cold winter days, as I was walking across the frozen river to Seoul-Bingo-dong, the ice would make crackling sounds under my feet. At church, I served as a Sunday school teacher. The children always enjoyed my interesting lessons. I'm no longer as adept at telling jokes as I was when I was young, but back then I could tell funny stories. When I wept, they wept with me, and when I laughed, they laughed along with me. I was so popular with them that they would follow me around wherever I went. Beyond Myeongsudae is Mount Sodan, also known as Mount Dharma. I would often climb up on a large boulder on Mount Dharma and spend the night in prayer. In hot weather and in cold, I immersed myself in prayer without missing a night. Once I entered into prayer, I would weep and my nose would start to run. I would pray for hours over words I had received from God. His words were like coded messages, and I felt I needed to immerse myself even more deeply in prayer. Thinking back on it now, I realized that even then, God had placed in my hands the key that unlocked the door to secrets. However, I wasn't able to open the door because my prayers were insufficient. I was so preoccupied that when I ate my meals, I didn't feel as though I were eating. At bedtime, I would close my eyes, but I couldn't fall asleep. Other students rooming in the same house didn't realize I was going up on the hill to pray. They must have felt I was somehow different though, because they related to me with respect. Generally, we got along well, making each other laugh by telling funny stories. I can relate well with anyone. If an old woman comes to me, I can be her friend. If children come, I can play with them. You can have communication of heart with anyone by relating to them with love. Mrs. Ki-Wan Lee became close to me after she was inspired by my prayers during early morning services at the church. In Korea, Christians would get up every morning at 5 a.m. and go to church for morning service. Every morning, not just Sunday. I was there delivering newspapers for 3 years actually, in the morning. And you know, you pick up the newspapers at 3:30 in the morning, and you deliver them before anyone wakes up. So you're done by 6. But I would be delivering and I would see Christians with their Bibles going to church at 5 a.m. or even before 5 so they could be there at 5. I never saw this in America. I never saw this in any other country. I've been to Thailand and Japan. I've been to seen Taiwan. I've been to all over the United States. I've been to Europe, England, and Switzerland, and France, and Italy. I've been to Israel. I've been to many countries of the world. And I've never seen a country like Korea, where the Christians had that kind of devout, serious mind in prayer. So this is when he's talking about Mrs. Ki-Wan Lee being inspired by his prayers during early morning services of the church. That's what he's talking about, the 5 a.m. prayer. We maintained our friendship for more than 50 years until she left this world at age 80. Her younger sister, Mrs. Ki-Bong Lee, was always busy managing the rooming house, but she related to me with warmth. She would say she didn't feel right unless she could find something to do for me. She would try to give me extra side dishes for my meals. I didn't talk much and wasn't much fun, so I don't know why she would want to treat me so well. Sometime later, when the Japanese colonial police were holding me in the Gyeonggi province police station, she brought me clothes and food. Even now, it warms my heart to think of her. There was also a Mrs. Song, who ran a small store near my rooming house. She helped me a lot during this time. She would say that anyone who lives away from his hometown is always hungry, and she would bring me items from her store that she had not been able to sell. It was a small store, and she barely made enough money to support herself, but she always took care of me with a kind heart. One day we held a service on a sandy stretch by the Han River. When it came time for lunch, everyone found a place to sit down and eat. I was in the habit of not eating lunch and didn't feel comfortable sitting there doing nothing while others ate. I quietly walked away from the group and found a place to sit on a pile of rocks. Mrs. Song saw me there and brought me 2 pieces of bread and some flavored ice. How grateful I felt. These were just 1 jun apiece and only 4 jun in total, but I've never been able to forget the gratitude I felt in that moment. I always remember when someone helps me, no matter how small it may be. Even now that I am 90 years old, I can recite from memory all the times that people helped me and what they did for me. I can never forget the people who did not hesitate to put themselves to great trouble on my behalf and generously gave me their blessings. If I receive a favor, it is important to me that I repay it. If I cannot meet the person who did this for me, it is important for me to remember that person in my heart. I need to live with a sincere thought that I will repay the person by helping someone else. Thank you. That was a lot of reading today, but I felt that Father's life is so inspiring that it's something that I want to try to emulate myself. Can you guys try to live like that? That's a very serious way to live, isn't it? That's I thought about, some of you guys are being waiters and waitresses, and think about taking care of people with the same heart that Father had. Think about, whatever job you're doing, taking care of that person as if they're the only person in the world. Father is the Messiah. We should realize that. He's the second coming of Christ. But if you're a Christian and you have this idea of Jesus as walking on air, like in many of the movies about Jesus, they had him not even walking, they had him kind of like floating like this. It was like he didn't have legs. It was like he was just floating along, And they made him look like this person that didn't, live in the physical world. And people have this idea of the Messiah, that he's somehow not of this world. But actually, my experience with Father has shown me that also Jesus and Father both were people who lived very much in the world. Very much conscious of each person that was around them. Very much aware of the love that people around them were giving them. They recognized and gave credit to people for the love that they gave. So Father was not the Messiah because he lived in a different world. He's the Messiah because he showed us how to live in this world with God. Right? So can you do that? Can you invest in the moment so much that God is drawn to you, that God has to come to you because there's nobody else around that's living like you are? Can you live that way? Investing in every person you meet. If you do that, you will feel, as Father said, it becomes like a mystical experience when you invest your sincerity and dedication. When you do art, if you invest your sincerity and dedication, Father said, a masterpiece will come through your brush. Because your intensity of focus and determination and sincerity will cause your awareness to heighten. And Father said you can enter a mystical experience. You can go beyond the physical world, right? Living in it. And don't you think you can feel that way about people too? Father felt that way when he met people. He felt that he could feel their ancestors. Father one time called me out. In a public speech, there were hundreds of people, but he asked me to stand up, and he questioned me about something that he had no way of knowing. No way of knowing. And he doesn't do that usually, but he spoke to me. At the same time, my wife was at home, 70 miles away, and he came to her the same moment in a vision. "Are you all right?" he said. He was speaking to Oma and me about the same thing. Father is that sensitive to people. But he's not he's not built differently than us. It's just that he has heightened his sensitivity to love more than anyone else in the world. So that he's so sensitive to love, and he vibrates with the frequency of true love, that Satan could not be near him. That's why the Messiah doesn't have sin. The Messiah doesn't have sin because he's vibrating with a frequency of love that's so high, so strong, that if Satan comes near, he can't bear to be in the same room with Father. That's how Father lived his life. He drove Satan away by love. Can you do that? Can you live your life that way? I think you can. I think I can. I think we can. Every day practice. Every day invest in people. Every day deepen your heart and your understanding of people and your sensitivity to people. And gradually your heart will become bigger and deeper. And you will understand people. Without even saying a word, you can look at a person and know what they're going through. You can sense what they've been through in their life. And you can immediately become friends with them. And with one word, you can open their heart and they can burst into tears. You can do this. If you live your life like this, your family will be beautiful. Your husband and wife relationship will be much more beautiful and solid. And also your parent-child relationship will be beautiful. Your children will receive the blessing of having parents that are so sensitive and beautiful and loving. And that kind of family becomes a model family in the community, naturally. And you will spread that influence to the community, to the nation, and to the world. If enough families do this, we can see the kingdom of heaven appear on the earth. This is God's will. That the kingdom of heaven be built on the earth, not as someplace we go when we die, but build it here so we live in love. So every community is filled with beautiful families that are loving each other and loving the world around them. Can you imagine a world filled with people like that? That's the world God wants to build. And we need to be the ones to build it. God will be with us every minute, and you will feel God's love every minute that you do it. Please join me in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we want to thank you. You always find a way to speak through Sunday service, through this time. Whenever we care about somebody else, you're going to be there. And you're going to be in our words and in our heart. And you're going to transmit your message through our words, through our heart, through our expressions, through our communication. Father gave us a great example of true love. I pray that we can also follow that example of true love and live our lives with that same kind of enthusiasm, intensity, sincerity, and dedication that Father lived his life. And that we can become mini messiahs. If Father was a cosmic level Messiah, then let us be town and community level messiahs, Father. Tribal messiahs like Father's. Please bless this day. I ask your blessing on everyone who's listening to these words, that they can receive your blessing, that they can receive your guidance, and they can become your true sons and daughters. I ask your blessing on this day and offer all this in the name of Raman and Tamiko Montanaro, a blessed central family. 축복 중심 가정, 라만과 타미코 몬타나를 이름으로 포고드립니다. 아멘. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.